It's hard to believe that we have just passed the 1 year anniversary of October 7th. While our attention has been so much on war and Israel's military, at the same time, Israel as a nation continues to innovate and change the world with its intellectual capital. At the heart of that is Hebrew University, with its 25,000 students and a ranking that puts it in the top 5% of all universities worldwide. In fact, HU has generated over 11,500 patents, won numerous prizes, and has generated 200 plus spin-off companies. One example of how Hebrew University's work is literally changing the world is in the area of plant and food technology. In that world, imagine with me that we could use genetically engineered plants to sustainably and cost effectively produce all kinds of goods, from meat and dairy products to replacement parts for human beings. It would truly be a gift from nature. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us as we welcome you to today's webinar, the fourth in a series we call The Future of Food. Today's topic is the plant age, materials and food for the future, nature's gift. This series is designed to highlight innovative solutions that don't just occur in the lab, but also in actual commercial enterprises. Today, again, we have the pleasure of featuring some of those companies. My name is David Riccinati, and I am a member of the AFHU's Western Region and National Boards. And I have the pleasure of welcoming you to this program featuring the esteemed Professor Oded Shoshayov. Now, before we jump into the program, I do want to take just a minute to remind you all about Hebrew University's We Are One campaign. The campaign was established on October 9, 2023, and it continues to support the HU community through the provision of services for all who need help. That includes students and faculty members from Southern Israel and those returning to campus from active military duty. This all gets manifested in three key initiatives on campus, and the campaign is focused on. One is mental health and resilience. Two is Arabs and Jews building a shared society. And three is strengthening the southern city of Ofakim. In addition, the We Are One campaign is funding unique scholarships for the 5,000 plus reservists who have been rotating out of active duty to resume their studies. To put that in context, that is 20% of the university's entire student population. We will share a link in the chat for further information. We are grateful for any donations in any amount, and thank you in advance for your generosity. Now, turning to our speaker. To further introduce Professor Oded Shoshayov, Professor Oded is a faculty member at Hebrew University's Faculty of Agriculture, Food, and Environment, and he specializes in plant molecular biology, protein engineering, and, of course, nanobiotechnology. Why not? He has authored or co-authored over 350 scientific publications, and he is the inventor or co-inventor of over 100 patents. In 2016, Oded gave a TED Talk titled How We're Harnessing Nature's Hidden Superpowers, which garnered more than 1.8 million views and was translated into 22 languages. Professor Shoshayov has received numerous awards, and on top of all that, imagine, Oded, in all your spare time, you are the scientific founder of 20 companies. It is now my pleasure to turn the presentation over to Professor Shoshayov.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we can
we
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the plant age materials and food for the future, nature's gift. And I hope that by the end of my presentation, I will be able to convince you that we are either on the verge of the plant age, if not already there. But before I start, I'd like to quote the former Minister of Oil of Saudi Arabia that said something smart in my view. He said that the oil age the Stone Age, sorry, did not end for lack of stones, and the oil age will end long before our oil runs out of our wells. And I think that this is for a good reason, because biomaterials are so much better. But admittedly, this is not good enough to criticize the scientists why not making really good synthetic materials from oil, simply because we didn't have enough time. 200 years of modern chemistry is not enough to make really good materials, while nature had billions of years to develop some of the most amazing materials that we wish we had in our possession. Nevertheless, the doctors, particularly orthopedic surgeons, like to screw and glue synthetic materials in our body. And I don't think that this is a great idea. And reason is that synthetic materials fail. Just like this plastic fork that is not strong enough. But admittedly, there are very strong synthetic materials, yet their biomechanical properties do not necessarily fit the surrounding tissues, and that's why it is really not a good idea. But there is even a more fundamental reason why it's not a good idea to glue and screw synthetic materials in our body, and simply because in nature things are done differently. In nature, no one takes my head and screw it into my neck, or take my skin and glue it onto my body. In nature, everything is self-assembled. Every living organism is actually made of cells, and the cells contain DNA. The DNA encodes for nanobio building blocks. Many times, these nanobio building blocks are proteins. Other times, these proteins may be enzymes that make other nanobiomaterials like fatty acids, polysaccharides. And the beauty of all these nanobiomaterials is that they really don't need us. They recognize each other and self-assemble into scaffolds on which cells are growing, develop into tissues develop into organs, and together that's the organism. So we at the Hebrew University already recognize this phenomenon, that in fact, it doesn't really matter which material you would like to produce. You can simply address the gene that encodes for the nanobiomaterials that makes this material. And once you have the genetic code, you can actually produce it wherever you want. Now, if you look at nature and you ask yourself, who are the creatures that produce the most efficient way? It's plants. Why? Because plants are at the bottom of the food chain. Everybody eats plants and not the other way around. So once we command this technology, we ask ourselves, what can we produce using these very beautiful plants and technologies? And one very important market, which we're all familiar with today, is the food market. The global meat consumption is huge and continue to grow. Meat industry is not as sustainable as we wish it would. And for that, different technologies were developed over the years. And most recently, cultured meat became very interesting, very important, where in principle, we can take any stem cells from any animal and using bioreactors, we can now grow these cells into whole cat. Now, this culture meat business, on one hand, is quite attractive, but the challenges are huge. And I'll give you here just one of the predictions, even the early predictions of GFI, which is a non-government institution that does surveys and try to predict what will be the level of production and consumption of the different kind of meat alternatives. And the cultured meat is estimated to reach a level of 10% at 2030. So that's not too many years from now. But 10% is actually quite a lot. You're really talking about 38 million tons of meat. Now, one of the biggest challenge of the cultured meat industry is the cost of the growth factors that have to be fed into the bioreactors. What are these growth factors? Many of us know them with other names, like, for example, insulin or transferrin, FGF2, TGF-beta. All these growth factors are very important for the cells to grow, proliferate, and differentiate into the type of cells that or type of tissues that we would like them, either muscle tissue or fat tissue. So I will not go through the entire table here, but let's take just one example to show you how significant is the challenge. So take, for example, insulin. Today, the cost of insulin per gram is about $340 US. Now, the cost of only that insulin in 1 kilogram of meat, the current cost is $135 US. So this is just for the insulin. Of course, no one is gonna pay hundreds of dollars for 1 kilogram of cultured meat. So we need to do something to reduce the cost. And in fact, to make it really cost effective, so it will compete with regular meat, we need to cut the cost by 2 orders of magnitude. In other words, less than $4 per gram of insulin, which will be translated to about $1, $1.50 per kilogram of meat, which now makes more. Is the volume or the scale that we need to produce this. So just that 10% in 2030 that is required, 10% of the meat market will require 17,000 tons of insulin. I'm going to repeat this number because it's shocking, actually. 17,000 tons. Now, why is it so shocking? Because the current production of insulin, total production, world production of insulin is less than 200 tons. So there is no way that, the Lonza companies or Amgen or anybody can now take their factories and in less than 10 years convert them from making only 200 tons to 17,000 tons. No one has the capex, and even if they do it, it's not going to change a lot because the cost of insulin in the current production method is too high. So what we have done at the Hebrew University, which was translated into a company called BioBetter, we have been able to clone the genes of these growth factors into tobacco plants. So now, instead of producing them in bioreactors, which are very expensive, we simply put it in the ground, grow, we extract the growth factor. And as you can see here, this is just one example of FGF2, where we compared it to the performance of the commercial recombinant FGF2. And as you can see, it actually even outperformed. And together with the ability to cut the cost by more than 2 orders of magnitude. And of course, it is scalable because now you can produce as much as you want. All you need is land and grow the plants. Another very interesting avenue in the meat alternatives is plant-based alternatives. In fact, it's not so new. In Israel, we have Tivol, and I'm sure in the US you had some other brands of plant-based meat alternatives for many years. But over the last 5 or 6 years, there have been a lot of progress in this field, which mainly derived by 2 or 3, I would say, waves. One is the health and wellness wave, which result from customers that worry about eating too much meat that may contain antibiotics or cholesterol, all sorts of other reasons. Of course, the most important thing is the sustainability. As I'm sure you know, the meat industry, particularly the bovine industry, is very ineffective. We feed the animal with something like 100 calories, and we get back something like 3 or 4 calories in terms of proteins. So it's not very efficient. And on the way, these cows produce greenhouse gases in the form of carbon dioxide and methane, which actually more than the production of greenhouse gases of all the cars, all the trains, all the trucks all together. So sustainability is a very important issue. And another very important pillar is the food safety. Today, food safety is an issue, and people would like to make sure that what they eat is safe. And obviously, when you eat meat, you're more prone to get disease that affect or pathogens that affect animals, such as mad cow disease and others. But here's the problem. The problem and the biggest challenge is the texture. I mean, all these beautiful technologies are nice, but we have to remember that we are carnivores. And as carnivores, we really need the texture, the bite. I once had this conversation with an Israeli chef who told me something very interesting. He said that once in a while he's being asked to make a catering. There will be only a fish or cheese. And he said, I know that there is plenty of food, but you look at the people, many of them walk around like they're really, something is missing, they're really hungry. And most probably it's because we really need this bite, this texture that only meat so far, real meat can produce for us. Now, that is not to say that the technology has not been developed. In fact, technologies have been developed to get a good texture or better texture of plant-based proteins. For example, if you take a soy protein, typically, if you don't do something too special, then the texture will feel more like tofu. Well, not really a meaty texture. But then if you take the same protein and you introduce it into this $1 million piece of machine that you see here on the screen, after applying extremely high pressure and temperature, this extruder actually extrude a material which is called TVP, or texturized vegetarian protein, that admittedly have a texture, I wouldn't say as good as or similar to that as beef, but it is more like maybe tender chicken or chicken breast, which is acceptable for some of the customers, but not to all of them. The biggest problem is that this process consume a lot of energy, and it's a very, very slow one. This $1 million piece of machine produce at a rate of only 300 kilograms per hour. It's nothing. It's really nothing. And so we really need something much better for that. So we at the Hebrew asked ourselves, well, plants also make fibers, not just animals, and definitely not just these very expensive extruders. And in fact, plants make fibers at atmospheric pressure, room temperature, and in fact, by negative carbon footprint. So why don't we use these fibers in a way that will enable us to really get a nice texture? So for that, we developed a very special kind of cellulose extracted from plants. And we can control the texture of this cellulose to be as soft as jelly or even hard as a bone, and of course, fibrous as a meat. And that technology was also matured, and another company was established called Savorit. And Savorit actually decided to take this technology one step further. And the reason for that is that today there is another trend in the market, which is not just in the food, but in fact in everything, in the TV, in the movie industry, in whatever you do, that's personalization. People would like to personalize everything, what they watch on the TV or in the video, but also what they eat. And the practical problem of that is that if the industry will produce thousands of different flavors or textures or size, logistically, it's impossible. So in order for us to be able to do it, we really need to move the factory very close to the customer itself. So in a way, to the cafeteria or to the restaurant, where the customer will be able to look at the screen, select exactly what he wants to eat, decide by himself if he wants to have, let's say, a beef burger. Of course, it's not real beef, it's plant-based, or maybe a taste of pork or chicken. And then we'll be able to decide if he would like it to be with high protein because he worries about his muscles, or if he would like to have more fat or less fat, and of course decide the size, and of course the level of doneness, like rare or medium or well done. And with the push of a button, this smart robot will print and cook for him on the spot the burger that he would like to eat. Of course, it's a plant-based burger. So the technology actually matured. We actually performed a very successful pilot for close to half a year in Denver, in one of the universities, together with Sodexo, which is a big food service in the US. And we're actually ready now to launch the product commercially. There are a lot of advantages to this technology. One is, of course, the ability to get in real time feedback from the customers that actually order their burger from their smartphone. And the next step, once we get, of course, the approval of the customers, when they're using their smart watch, this smartwatch will actually deliver automatically to us how they react physiologically to that particular burger that we provided them, and maybe offer them next time something that is more suitable for their health needs. And this is something that today people would like to call food as a medicine. Another big issue with the, of course, with the animal industry is the dairy products. I mean, we use cows and sheep, and of course, that's something that many people like and enjoy, having dairy products. But as we said before, the traditional animal-based protein production system is not sustainable. And it's not sustainable, and there are significant environmental and social and health challenges with this industry. At the same time, milk becomes more and more popular in the world. In fact, the market keep growing dramatically. In 2020, the global dairy market value slightly more than $800 billion US. And in 2026, it will surpass 1.1 trillion US dollar. So obviously, we need a lot of that, and that's quite a big challenge. Yes, there are today some plant-based alternatives, but as you can see also from the graph, it is still relatively small. So something like $20 billion US. Of course, significant market, but doesn't even come close. And one of the reasons for that is that people that like dairy products will admit that it's okay, but it's not as good as the original thing. So we, again, decided to try, just like many others in the world, to address this issue. Many companies and many scientists in the world actually decided to approach a technology which is called precision fermentation. What is precision fermentation? In precision fermentation, we, for example, take a gene that encodes for a desired protein, for example, casein, which is the major milk protein, clone the gene into either a bacteria or to fungi or to yeast, and using these giant fermenters, grow the, for example, the yeast, and then extract the protein and use that to produce a dairy alternative. The problem with this technology is that even if you are very successful, the calculations shows that cost of production, even at large scale, is not going to be lower than $70 US per kilogram protein, which means that maybe a very expensive camembert or something, but it's not feasible for milk or yogurt or anything like this. And this also requires a lot of capex. Just to give you a feel, 250,000 liter fermenter cost close to $500 million US. So it's a lot of investment, a big investment, and limited supply and demand flexibility, because to build such a thing costs a lot of money. At the same time, if you compare the performance of plants are much better. Take, for example, soy. Soy protein costs today less than $1 a kilogram. So 2 orders of magnitude cheaper than in precision fermentation. And for the production side, it's actually zero capex, because the company has to go to a farmer, give him the seeds, and he can produce it for in his farm. And all you need to do is now deal with the downstream. So it's so the capex is very low or close to zero. Optimal supply and demand flexibility. And so we decided to actually to do this biofarming way. But this is a very challenging project. And for that, we actually teamed up with groups both in New Zealand. New Zealand, as I'm sure you know, is the biggest dairy product exporter in the world. In fact, close to 50% of the GDP in New Zealand is dairy. And they understand well the problems. And so Ira Bing, as you can see here, is the co-founder and the head of strategy. He actually approached us at the Hebrew University after they saw that we have a lot of experience in producing very difficult proteins to produce in plants. And we set up a new company called Miruku, funded by venture capital funds from different places, mainly from Australia, New Zealand, and Singapore. And in fact, it's a very interesting team because on one hand, all the molecular biology and genetic engineering is done in Israel, but all the food technology is actually done in New Zealand, in the Reddit Institute. You can see here distinguished Professor Harjinder Singh, who is the head of the Reddit Institute, is one of the best dairy research institutes in the world. And we also work with CSIRO, which is the equivalent of the USDA in Australia. So very impressive team. And of course, I told you that the upstream or the production of the protein can be done in oil seeds, like for example, soybeans, but also with some other seeds, which I'll discuss in a second. But the other issue is always the downstream, because downstream process also of technologies that are already implemented in large scale in protein in oil production of oil seeds. The first step to clone and engineer the genes that encodes for the proteins in the cow is done by computational tools. Today we have really sophisticated computational tools. One of them you can see on the left. It's called AlphaFold. It's a really wonderful tool. One of the most amazing tools that was developed by artificial intelligence in the last few years, where you can take any sequence, introduce it into the computer, and it will predict in a very short period of time the perfect three-dimensional structure of the protein, which indicates, of course, in its functionality. So using all these tools, we've been able to design and optimize the gene structures that need to be introduced into the plant. And now we had to also start to think about the downstream process, because it's very important when you start the design of your proteins to understand how you're going to extract them. And so what is very unique in the way that in our approach is we engineer these proteins to bind to the fat or the oil bodies of the seed. And here the idea is that instead of using very expensive extraction and purification methods, if everything works, we can simply take the seeds with some water, we can crush them, centrifuge, and separate the cream from the insoluble material. And that is, of course, extremely economic process. And now, once you have this cream, you can either dilute it with some water to get milk, or you can whip it if you want to make a whipped cream, or you can make cheese or yogurt or any dairy products that you wish. So this is actually how we actually design the proteins. We design them in a way that they will bind these oil bodies that are found in the seeds. And we had many discussions with the FDA in the US to understand what will be the best plant from the regulatory point of view. Should we go to soybeans? Should we go to others? And we came together to the conclusion that this beautiful plant that is called safflower. It's not sunflower, it's safflower. Safflower is very resilient plant, and it makes really beautiful white seeds. And these white seeds makes an excellent and very healthy oil, which have several advantages. First of all, it has no color. Second, it has no flavor. So that's great because now we don't have this off flavor of soy or pea or oat or whatever people are using now to make dairy alternatives. In addition to that, this plant, unlike canola, for example, is very sensitive for hot temperatures. This is very resilient plant. You can actually even grow it in the desert. For years, people were growing it in Egypt. And so it's a wonderful plant. You can grow it in large scale, both in the US, also in Australia, which most probably will be one of our first commercial sites. And on the right at the top, you can actually see the process that we're doing. So we first clone the genes that encodes for the proteins in the milk. These are the alpha and beta and kappa caseins. So these are three very important. Then we have the lactoglobulins, which makes the whey protein. And in addition to that, we cloned also the lactoferrin, which is also very important for our immune system and for protection of the milk from bacteria and bacterial growth. And after the design, we actually introduced the synthetic genes by genetic engineering into the plant by gene transformation, and then we can grow them. And the way we envisage using that technology is by simply having fields that each one will have a particular protein of interest. And then in the dairy factory, we will have silos. In each silo, we will have the different seeds. And you can actually produce whatever product that you wish without separating now the milk to its components. But in fact, you can now mix and match whatever you want. Now, this is for the proteins, but we didn't stop there because, as I'm sure you know, the fat composition, the fatty acid composition of dairy is different than in the plant. So what we are also doing, we're actually engineering the biochemical pathway and makes the fatty acids more resembling those that we have, or actually identical to what in the milk. So in fact, once you take this composition of seeds and you crush them and you squeeze it, you get a cream that feels and tastes exactly and functional exactly as you have with the real cow, except without the cow. We have already done a lot of studies, and we found that these seeds are quite suitable for the task. And we really believe that this is going to be a very important for world economy. Now, in terms of economics, it's really unbeatable because unlike the dairy that makes a lot of greenhouse gases, this plant actually absorbs the CO2, so it actually benefits the environment. In addition, we utilize the entire seed, so not just the proteins, but also the oils that are already there, and it is scalable. You can actually grow it almost in any place in the world because this plant is so resilient. And we believe that in the near future, we will have all sorts of different products, not just the classic dairy products like milk and cheese and yogurts, but also protein bars and bakery and confectionery and you name it. The next time when we will meet these guys in the field, I guess if we understand their language, the sheep will say that we are in the plant age, guys, and the cow, the animals will tell us, give us a break and let us just graze there and leave us alone. And I would like now to quote another smart guy before I wrap my presentation. And that was Pavlov. Pavlov said that if you want a new idea, you should open an old book. And I say that the book was actually written. It was written over billions of years of evolution. And the text is the DNA of life. We don't really need to reinvent the wheel or make synthetic materials. We just need to read the text and start our progress from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Oded. Boy, I can't figure out whether I want to jump on a plane to New Zealand today or tomorrow, or I can't figure out when I want to eat one of those burgers, but it was an incredibly impressive 30 minutes in multiple companies and multiple products. So we've got a bunch of questions for you. We have questions probably for just about another 10 minutes, unfortunately, and then we'll have to wrap up. One thing I thought was really powerfully consistent across everything you talked about was the ability to make things economical. I think the biggest challenges plant and food technologies have had is they can't crack the code for making a burger economical. So maybe let's start with burgers. I'm curious, how much is it going to cost for a consumer to buy a Savor Eat burger? Is it going to be like a regular burger? Is it cheaper because of its automation? Love to hear about that.
So I can give you a few numbers. Currently, our cost of production of the burger is, and I say a burger of about 120 grams. So our cost of production is about 65 cents. That is the cost of production, which actually enable the consumer, or everything in between, to buy it for about $2 and leave profits to everybody in the chain, which is Savor Eat as a company, Sodexo, or any other food chain. Yeah, and of course the condiments and things that also cost a little bit, but this is it's quite economic. In fact, one of the things we learned from this pilot that we had in Denver was that burgers are sold mainly for lunch and dinner, but the cafeteria is open also in the morning. So we figured out, hey, why shouldn't we do some other things there? So we actually developed recently hash browns. So you can actually also have hash browns. And interestingly enough, we made also a chocolate chip cookie with the same technology. And more recently, this is not a product yet, but it's in development, falafel. You know, it's
I'm having visions of the Star Trek replicator
like a
here.
big
And to true Israeli,
falafel-like
Oded,
burger. I don't know how popular will it be in it.
you've taken on Nestle, Starbucks, and McDonald's all at the same time. I love that. Um, so we have to know, this always comes up. If I have a pork burger from Savor Eats, is it kosher?
Yeah, it's actually kosher. And interestingly enough, we had pilots also in Israel, and we had one in Facebook in Israel, and we have this pork burger. It's like breakfast sausage, as you call it.
Yeah.
And what we found out that it was most popular within the religious customers
The
because they really
forbidden
want to
fruit.
taste.
You have discovered the forbidden fruit, Oded.
Yeah.
Um, as much as I think we'd love to talk burgers for another 20 minutes, maybe let's talk about insulin for a second. So, insulin is also very important for medical reasons.
Right.
There was a question out of curiosity. Is this insulin that also can be used for diabetics? And does it change the paradigm on what that costs for that treatment?
So theoretically, the answer is yes, but the particular insulin that we are actually producing is a bovine insulin, and therefore it's not likely to give that particular protein to a human. But if you want to produce, I mean, we just need to pick the human gene sequence and produce the human one. We haven't done that. And we're not really planning to do it for a simple reason. The potential market for bovine insulin is close to 68 billion US dollar just for the 10%. Okay.
Correct.
Whereas the total market for insulin today is about $6 to $7 billion. So
Interesting.
it is smaller market. And of course, if we will reduce the price, we will simply cannibalize the market. So I don't know if that so
Understood. That makes a lot of sense. Well, maybe staying on the tobacco plants that you talked about and the 17,000 tons of insulin. How many acres of tobacco plants are going to be required? I mean, it conceptually makes a lot of sense, but I'm seeing like an entire continent covered by
yeah.
tobacco plants.
Okay, so we actually made this calculation, and we figure out that the supply, the world supply of insulin for the culture meat industry will take about a 40,000 acre farm, which is significant for Israel, but in the US you have
It's
such
nothing.
farms.
Yeah,
It's not
30,000.
nothing, but
In a
it's
US scale, it's very achievable to your point. Um, Maybe we'll in the last 2 minutes we'll turn to, and I probably will pronounce it wrong, Miruku in New Zealand. And that's very fascinating about the safflower plant. Is that plant basically an annual crop plant, or is it a perennial? Like, is it a crop as we think about crops today?
it's annual. So you put the seeds, and it's like canola, and you harvest it. It grows for it's about 3.5, 4 months. Then you harvest it with a combine, and that's it.
Got
And
it.
There is another very big advantage of this technology is in terms of logistics, because today, for example, a dairy farm in the world, in the US, or in Australia, the distance between the dairy farm and the dairy factory is approximately anywhere between 200 to 300 kilometers. Now, milk is only 4% protein and 3% fat. So you actually deliver a lot of water. Now, the
Right.
seeds is almost 10 times more concentrated
I see where
because you
you're
have
going. Yeah,
like
makes a
30,
lot of sense.
30%, 40% fat and protein. And therefore, on every 10 tracks of milk that you need to refrigerate, you transfer at room temperature 1 track of seeds. So
So,
this is
when
another
people,
thing.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Um, so when people hear the words genetic engineering, sometimes it sets off some alarm bells. And so we're talking about a genetically engineered safflower plant. Like,
Yeah.
is the plant less durable than the normal plant, or what could go wrong in terms of the genetic engineering plant impacting, affecting other plants in the ecosystem?
Okay. Okay, so that's a great, it's a really great question. And it actually goes back to, I mentioned the discussion we had with the FDA. And in fact, the first plant that we actually aimed for was soybeans. But after the discussion with the FDA, they told us that they prefer that we will not do it in soybean because dairy proteins are allergenic. So some people are allergic to dairy. About something like the 20% of human beings are allergic to dairy in one way or the other. And therefore they worried that if we will put it in something like soy, and it will be some contamination uh, along the supply chain, this will be a big and so that's why they asked us to look for a oilseed plant that first of all is not necessarily grown close to a soybean, and it will be distinguishable from the soy, and that's one of the reasons why we picked safflower. So that was actually the main concern.
Mm-hmm.
General concern about genetic engineering, at least in the US, in Canada, Brazil, Australia, of course, Israel, has been reduced significantly because we have today more than 30 years of experience. And in fact, 90% of the soy and the corn in the US is genetically engineered. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. So it's there. We're there, is what you're
yeah,
saying.
we are there.
Got it. Well, maybe I will wrap with one last question because the doctors out there do want to know if we compare your plant-based meat to natural meat, how does it compare in terms of the balance of proteins and nutrients that one can expect to get out of quote unquote real meat?
Okay, so first of all, it is more healthy because we don't have trans fatty acids there. So that's one thing. In terms of nutritional value, it is a full protein because we combined both pea protein, chickpea protein,
Mm,
and other proteins that actually makes a complete protein. And in terms of proportion of protein versus fat, it's actually your choice. I mean, you decide. And we don't call it high fat, we call it the chef and sporty. So the sporty will have more protein and significantly less fat. Uh, by the way, it's very interesting. In Israel, when we did this study, everybody went to the chef University, most of them pick the sporty.
Right. So we have a higher view of ourselves as athletic, which is probably not true, to be honest. Well, Odetta, on chef versus sporting note, I wanted to wrap up and really thank you for an absolutely fascinating presentation and frankly inspiring about what's going on in Israel today in the world of the future of food. I just want to say to learn more about Hebrew University's research discoveries, innovations, upcoming events, and find out how you can be involved with AFHU and support Hebrew University, please just visit us at afu.org. And thank you, everybody. And Oded, thank you again. And everyone
Thank you,
enjoy
David.
the day.
Thank you.